Good. She did her master's degree at the Department of English, University of Calicut, specializing on engendering of familial bonds in the novels of Shashi Deshpande. She completed her MPhil with a thesis on gender, sexuality, and creativity at Sri Shankaracharya University of Sanskrit and is currently doing her PhD research on female insanity. She started her service at Government Brennan College, Talasheri in 2015. She has proved her merit not only as an academician but as a social activist as well. She has to her credit numerous publications that comprises of articles and other translated works. She is an excellent orator, writer, and translator with areas of interest in studies on marginalization, gender studies, and comparative literature. She has presented many papers of academic interest in various seminars. I formally welcome Ms. K.R. Raghi to the second day of Nuances, a series of talks on literature to speak on reading the marginalized in literature.
Am I audible?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Okay. First of all, I would like to thank the Department of English, SNGS College Patambi, and especially Shiv Shankar sir for having invited me to interact with students. I'm supposed to know that we have majority of students here, UG and PG, and distinguished academicians from other institutions. So before I start, uh, it's not a presentation actually. It's these are some scattered thoughts that I've tried to formulate into the form of a paper or a presentation. So before I start, I would like to know if there are non-Malayalis among us. So if there are any non-Malayalis, please do comment in the chat box very soon. Please do that, that I can prioritize what I am going to present. It would be nice if I'm informed. Okay. So meanwhile, if you want to take time, yeah, you can just comment in the chat box if we have any non-Malayalis among our audience. Yes. So what I propose to discuss today is reading the marginalized in literature. And okay, we have a few of them. That's fine. So when we talk about marginalization, I want to take this into a path that has given me the insights of what it is like to be a marginalized person, or what do you mean by marginalization? Because I have also gone through my own paths to understand what marginalization is, and this is a very continuing process as far as I'm concerned. So my way of uh, presenting would be a blend of a blend of my personal journey uh, uh, as as an aspiring academician, or as an aspiring social being committed to political correctness and all. So that would be one way of presenting my thoughts. The other way would be, because it is about reading the marginalized in literature, I would be connecting to various literatures that have dealt with marginalization. So it has been a long journey. At the outset, I would like to tell a very simple thing. Okay, so when we think about marginalization, it's very difficult and it's very tricky to define what marginalization is, because for me, what marginalization means to you might not be, you know, a marginalized position. That is very personal, in a sense, because that's what I wanted to tell you in the beginning itself. That if you are in a privileged position, okay, it won't be easy for you to have this consciousness that you are being privileged. Understood. I hope I'm clear. If you're privileged, it's not necessary that you understand or realize that you're privileged. But if you're marginalized, it's quite easy for us to understand that we are being marginalized. And that's why I told you that it's a very tricky position, because it's not very easy to identify what is being marginalized and who is being marginalized. Okay, even if I'm a privileged, I'm just, these are all these things are hypothetical. Okay, the I and all is hypothetical. That if I am privileged, I might not understand that if I am being marginalized in a way or the other. So it's a very intricate process, or it's a very subtle process to understand um, what marginalization really means. Okay. And if you, I'm digressing. Like, if you have any doubts, or if you have any comments regarding my presentation, you can post then and there. And if it requires an urgent reply, I would be doing that. So I was intrigued by how should I present what marginalization is, and again, it's a very complex task for me. Still, I would like to attempt that one or two definitions which appeal to me in a way. So I came across this definition of marginalization by UNESCO, and it goes like that. Goes like this: marginalization is a form of acute and persistent disadvantage rooted in underlying inequalities. So I think this is a very crisp definition of what marginalization is, and I hope that it appeals to most of the nuances of what marginalization means. So again, I want to read once again. Marginalization is a form of acute and persistent disadvantage. These two terms are very important: acute disadvantage and persistent disadvantage, rooted in underlying inequalities. And one problem with this underlying inequalities, I'll come to it later. Okay. So when we talk about marginalization, I hope that we all have a sense of what marginalization is. So that is why I told you that it's very difficult to define what marginalization is exactly, because most of the time it's also a part of, it comes under this experiential level, the experiences that are not could not be could not be expressed or could not be even understood. uh, okay, so when we talk about marginalization, the first thing that comes to our mind is a sense of community, a sense of group. So this is about when we talk about marginalization in a theoretical term itself, it comes, the concept that comes to our mind is a group of people or a society based on various factors who have been marginalized at different walks of life, or through histories, you know, from as we say, from time immemorial. And we talk about religion, we talk about caste, we talk about sex, we talk about
Ragi, Shivashankar.
yeah,
Ragi, this is Shivashankar.
yeah.
Your noise is breaking.
Voice is
You have a
breaking.
technical problem there. Your sound is breaking.
Okay, is it clear now?
Now it's okay. Now it's okay.
Okay, I
No,
think
it's
the mic,
breaking in between.
the mic just went up. Yeah.
I think it's a
So,
technical problem, connectivity problem, I think. But it's okay.
is
It's
it
okay.
okay now?
Take your
Is it
time.
okay now?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
So I shall keep this mic like this and talk. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. So when I can't really draw a definition of marginalization as such, but we need to really engage certain concepts, certain terms regarding marginalization. to have a sense of what the term actually means. Okay, so I'm trying to propose certain terms, and I would not claim that it's a complete collection of terms, but I have attempted certain, certain concepts. So first one is, whenever we talk about marginalization, we also connect it with social exclusion as such. Okay, so when a group of people or a community in a society, so here is again another term that comes to prominence, is the term is mainstream. We always use that, and it in Malayalam you say it Mukhyadhara. Okay, even in Hindi we have this term Mukhyadhara. So the mainstream is where the power is located. Okay, and the power comes from a lot of components, like it could uh, one of the best being economy, the economic power, the money that you have, the social status that you hold in a society, the cultural advantages that you had throughout histories or throughout your life, or even the community to which you belong to. So this is the mainstream. Okay, and it's not necessary that the mainstream should be visible. Okay, and most of the time, yeah, it is correct. Most of the time, it's visible. The mainstream is visible, but here it is where the power is located. Okay, so we are talking about a center now. Okay, center where the power is located, and now we are going to talk about margins. Okay, so you have this periphery between the center and the margin. Okay, and these are two. I won't say that it's a binary positions that I'm placing, but it is there. There is a center and there is a margin in a society. And how does this happen? And we talk about social exclusion at the same time. Okay, so to this is again a very confusing process, that how did you if we are a community who are marginalized, how did we happen to be marginalized, or how did we come to the margins is another question. So there might be two types of marginalization. Again, I'm telling you, if I say 2, 3, 4, and 5, don't take it in the numerical sense. Okay, these are just thoughts. So there are two types of being marginalized. One is becoming marginal. Okay, you have this marginal position, and it's a becoming process. Okay, it's an ongoing process. And the other one is being made marginal. Okay, you are being made marginal. That is another form of marginalization. And we again, when we talk about this periphery, when we talk about this margins, there is we find that there is an outer limit. Okay, uh, uh, where you say there is an end. Okay, so just connect the culture, the society, and its end. What is that end? And or the edge where you're placed. And when I talk about the mainstream and the center and the power, as I just hinted now, it is also about being marginalized. It's also about relegating to pushback. Okay, to relegate to a very powerless position. Okay, to an unimportant position, to a powerless position. This is what marginalization is all about. It's a power play. Okay, where you have a position, you have a center position, you have a mainstream position where you got all the power, and you have this margin, or we have this group of people who occupy the fringes or the edges of the society, where they are deemed to be unimportant or powerless. So this is the position of about which I want to talk about. And um, and when I'm giving you these thoughts or terms, it is quite understandable, or it is quite um, actually mandatory in a sense to have certain examples in your mind. So when I talk about the mainstream, when I talk about the marginalized, when we talk about edges, when we talk about peripheries, and here we have this very evident examples that we have been seeing throughout the world, and especially recently. We see that the extreme form of marginalization is also about the extermination of communities. And this is very critical to our understanding of what marginalization is. So these are two types of concepts of marginalization, where you're pushed into a boundary, you're pushed into an edge where you are deemed powerless, you're not heard, you are not allowed to speak, you're not allowed to express yourself. Okay, and then we have this forceful extermination of community uh, by the power. Okay, you might take the example of the Rohingya community and their displacement. Okay, so before we really delve into the categories where marginalization fall, we can see that there are three types of marginalizations. The first one would be exclusion. As I started off with the concept of social exclusion, isn't it? How does a community become excluded? Okay, there are different concepts to that, because we all know that, as I think at least in our lifetime we would have read one or two books, maybe few movies, few poems. Okay, and I'm talking about exclusion. Why exclusion is so important when we have to understand the concept of marginalization. And the question is, how is the marginalized society depicted? Okay, and again, here we have another nuance about depiction, because depiction or representation of the marginalized community in literature or even in any discourse. Okay, um, the marginalized communities are either misrepresented, they're not represented properly, or they are not represented at all. To understand that, we can take the example of history textbooks that we have been learning in the school. So, when we take the historical context of India, we talk about kings, we talk about wars, we talk about the amount of wealth that the king collected. Okay, the buildings that the kings built. Okay, the maybe the the commander of his army, his okay, commander of his army, or maybe we have uh, the tax or the rules that the major rules that the kings proposed. We have all these details. Okay, so where do we find the narrative of common people inside these histories that we have been learning since schools? That's a major question. Doesn't mean that only the king and few of his subjects lived in a kingdom. No, it is not. We know that there were common people, isn't it? There were people who did all sorts of job. In your history textbooks, you might find that these were the main occupations. Okay, the agriculture was there, pottery making was there, so and so. You'd find such what do you say, passing references of what the life of common people were like, but we do not have a depiction, and that is what I told you about exclusion. It's not that you could be misrepresented as a community in a mainstream society. It also means the elision or deletion of the community altogether. You don't find histories of tribal communities anywhere, and you do not have histories of women. You do not have. Recently, I came across an article where it was about an archaeological reference to the Viking soldiers, where you have this amulets of soldiers being, unearthed and all, and people used to think that it all belonged to men, soldiers who were male. But later, the archaeologists found out that these amulets were not completely of men but also of women, because and it clearly stated that the Viking wars, uh, the soldiers consisted also of women and maybe more than men. That is what being understood. So this is what I meant when I told you about the complete elation or complete deletion of history. This has been happening since time immemorial, I would like to say. And I would delve into other examples when I talk about the different populations, different marginalized population. So we were talking about exclusion, where I was like trying to elaborate the forms of marginalizations. First one was exclusion, and the second one is these have very, you see, very intricate differences. Basically, it means same. Okay. Second one is subordination. And it could be very conscious one. Okay. You can subordinate someone because you have power. You can subordinate a history. You can subordinate a community. You can subordinate someone based upon the situation in which that person lives in. Okay, the situations, that is what I'm trying to explain further. So you have exclusion, we have subordination, and the third one is what I have been uh, focusing on since few years, when I have been trying to read and understand what marginalization is all about, and that is cultural invisibility. I know that these terms are very basic, but um, we must also understand that these terms are not innocent. Okay, there is nothing innocent about marginalization. So cultural invisibility is another um, sight, where it's a very invisible and sight, it's an oxymoron, I'm aware of that. But this thought or this analysis of cultural invisibility is the site where you find the marginalized community, and that is very important. Okay, you can find the marginalized community, marginalized group of people in misrepresentation and non-representation. Okay, these are I tried to elaborate these terms only for us to make it easy to understand how it has been dealt in literature. So when I'm talking about this, um, I was talking about my personal journey to marginalization, and it's not a very conscious one. Okay, so when I was in my school, obviously we in schools we might see that some students, although they're talented, they never occupy the front position inside a classroom. And for us it was like, okay, maybe we connected it to diffidence, we connected it to the inability to express oneself as a student. But later on, when I started probing into issues like class and caste, even sex, I came to understand that it is the silence of these students again was not because the school was completely uh, intolerant of these people, these students. It's also about a historical position that you have been holding inside this community that never wanted to hear you. Okay, that diffidence is not a momentary thing that got built up. It is a historical process. Okay, so you have been silenced since your memory started to develop, isn't it? You've never seen people from your community speaking up. You've never seen people from your community being assertive. Okay, apart from being, we can't even think about being aggressive. We have never been assertive as a marginalized community. And again, one thing that we all have to keep in mind is that marginalization is a very subjective position in many ways, because I told you it is very contextual also. The privileged person themselves might be marginalized in some areas which could be understood or misunderstood. But by large, I want to focus on the real issue of marginalization and how do you find it in literature. You When we talk about the marginalized community, or when we talk about the marginalized populations, how do we I mean, what are the sites where we see this process happening? I won't say that it is being happening, it is there, and it is a continuing process. Marginalization is a continuing process, because as far as we have power, there will be people who would be privileged and there would be people who are not privileged, and that is for sure. So you could marginalize a community based upon their sex, okay, based upon their sexual orientation, like the LGBT communities, okay, and you can marginalize people according to their caste, their class, their religion, okay, their physical condition, if they are being if they are differently abled or not, or even depending upon their occupation. And in India, occupation is like, uh, for chaturvarnya system, we have this clear connection between your caste and your occupation. Okay, so definitely we all know this social situation where certain occupation meant that you belong to a certain caste. And that is why, even if you belong to a very poor family, and even if you belong if even if you are in dire need of money, because you belong to a certain caste, you would never be able to, or you are never ready to accept certain occupation, even if it fetches you good money. Okay. Um, yes. For example, yeah, cleaning, scavenging, any job that you take, we find this marginalization. So that is an occupation which is reserved for a particular caste in India. Okay. So when we talk about sex, we are going to talk about it at the outset. We are going to talk about the famous binary of being a man and a woman. And you have this, I think, for the students from Calicut University, the degree students, you might be familiar with the text, um, uh, the speech by Adrian Rich, where you have to claim your education. And this particular speech, it tells you how the histories of women and how women altogether have been erased from our knowledge system, our education system. So being a woman is by default in these days, not, I'm sorry, not in these days, since time immemorial, being a woman by default makes you a marginalized community inside a society which is very patriarchal, which is very male centric. Uh, Not only this notion, again, this notion, the patriarchy is not something that is confined to men. This notion is there in every one of us, in women, in men, in other sexualities, in other sex. Okay, like if you are transgender, if you are intersex, I don't know if I talk about sexual orientation, how much we would be able to cover the categories of sexual orientation or your sexual identity. But I think you need to have another session about sexualities, because that's altogether a very very
Yes,
large,
yes, yes.
area that we have to discuss. So when we talk about the marginalized populations, we are also going to talk about the sex, women. I don't know from where I should start drawing examples in literature about the marginalization of women, because we have been talking about it, we have been writing about it, we have been speaking about it, we have been orating about it, we have been doing a lot about it, about the marginalization of women intellectually. Okay, but not socially. I don't know what if any of these studies have really influenced the social position of the marginalized community, at least for women. Okay, so whatever community that I'm going to talk today, it's a point of introspection where you have to think that we all debate, we all write, we all as even I'm doing now, we are all listening to something, what you say, expert talk, intellectual discussions, and what is the position, you place it with the actual social position of the marginalized community. Do we indulge in the practical sense of removing marginalization in our community? And that's a very, it's a very personal question that you should ask yourself. It's a very, it's a question that touches your conscience. Okay, so these talks actually should be a point where you should begin to begin to start thinking about marginalization. That is where my journey of study of marginalization begins, and I'm very thankful to the Department of English at Calicut University, because we had the selective paper. It was on literature on marginalization, literature of marginalization, and that was a very eye opening paper, because it went beyond textbooks. It is there where I actually started thinking about the marginal position of women, especially. I would recommend one book, The Women Studies in India, Women Writings in India by Susi Taru and K. Lalita. It's a two-volume book. And you find a very good introduction to this work, where they talk about the position of courtesans in India. Okay, the privileged position that they had in ancient India, and how it got completely dismantled by the invasion of coloniality, the colonial sense of morality, and how we just find for us the present notion about courtesans is almost synonymical to what do you say, sex workers, nothing more than that, isn't it? So, women writing in India is very important because it's a huge and exhaustive record of marginalized writings, because they have taken immense effort to compile the works of women across India from different languages. And it's not about the written literature. Okay, you have poetry, you have folk songs, you have you have personal accounts of people, even you have certain works which belong to the BC era of India. Okay, you have a woman Buddhist monk, Theri Gada. It's called Theri Gada. You have a poetry by a woman monk, Buddhist monk. So that is a very exhaustive. That's a very exhaustive compilation of the marginalized voices, the women voices in India, and we have a whole lot of collection. Okay, and. I'll tell you about another tool by which the marginalized voices have come into the forefront. So before that, I would like to touch upon this marginalized community based upon their sexual orientation. As we all know, LGBT community, like lesbian, bisexual, gay, transgender. You don't say LGBT anymore. It's about, you have hundreds of sexual orientations as such. So we say nowadays we say LGBTQA plus, pure asexual plus. So I don't want to go into the definitions of each and every sexual orientation, but we have never addressed sexual orientation. We don't even want to talk about sexuality because we think that it's all undercovers. I might enter into some controversy, but I would like to tell you about certain religions who completely ban homosexuality. Why do you ban homosexuality is a very critical question. See, for the propagation of any religion, you need to have people, isn't it? You need to have believers. You need to have offsprings. So to have offsprings, it's only possible in a heterosexual relationship. Okay, so homosexuality cannot be encouraged in a religion, because homosexuality don't fetch you offsprings, isn't it? And a very easy way to uh, to shape the minds of the believers is to just to tell them that it's a sin. So religion has been doing anything and everything, any kind of subordination, marginalization, using this specific thing called sin. Okay, the religion tells you that this sin, and you're not allowed to do that, isn't it? And again, I tell you, the sin, the process of sin itself is a very subjective position, even taken by religions. Because if in Christianity, incest is not allowed, isn't it? But and you have different definitions of incest also. In Egypt, there used to be, I mean, brothers and sisters married. And Christianity, even you can't even think about marrying a person, even they belong to your distant, relative group. You can't do that. And in Kerala, certain communities, we see that the you can marry your auntie's son or daughter, whoever it is. But and again, if you say that Christianity bans incest as sin, it's a very confusing position. If you go to the beginning of Bible, when it says that the only human beings that came to earth were Adam and Eve, and supposedly they had children. And how did those children produce the next generation? It's a very difficult question. I don't think that it was possible without the incest as far as Christianity is concerned. Yeah. So you have these sexual orientations. You ban homosexuality. You have the society is basically homophobic. And if you want to know what homophobia is, like, go and search for it, and you would understand that we all have this homophobia inside us, be it in the popular culture or be it in literature. How they have been, even for example, take transgenders, how they have been portrayed in movies, how they have been portrayed in literature. Okay, so when I was talking about women, the marginalization of women, let me take into account some characters. And when we talk about literature and characters, it is also about stereotyping. And that is very important. You get stereotyped in literature because if you belong to a particular, as I told you in the beginning, a situation, a position, you are expected to behave in a particular way. Okay, and that is a sort of marginalization. Okay, if you are a woman, for example, if you take the pictures of, okay, the paintings or even the description of women in the Elizabethan or Victorian era, you always would see a woman who is knitting. Okay, knitting all the time, or doing embroideries. And that is what is being expected from a woman, to be inside home. Okay, even you have that concept in India, in Kerala also. We talk about Andarjanams. Okay, the people who belong to the interiors of home, who do not have an exterior life. So these itself, no, this interior, exterior, these are also the boundaries. Okay, the physical and the cultural boundaries are very confusing. Take for example Lakshman Rekha. Okay, then we have to talk about caste. Uh, how uh, uh, how, because you belong to a particular caste, you have been marginalized. It starts from Mulk Raj Anand's Untouchable. We have a lot of examples. And if you really want to go into um, the compilation of literature, as I told you, we have books like Steel Nips Are Sprouting, and we have a Malayalam anthology published by Oxford Publications, which was edited by Professor Dasan and Professor V. Pratibha. You can go and see that's the Malayalam translation of Dalit writings from Kerala. And we have marginalization based upon class, uh, which could be connected to your occupation and your caste. Um, by default, again, we can understand that according to the jobs or according to the occupation done by a particular caste in Indian society, also meant that you belong to a particular class, and you are not expected to outgrow your caste, outgrow your caste consciousness and your class consciousness. This is subordination and this is exclusion at the same time. Okay, to understand that, it's very important. I would recommend you to read not the English work but the Malayalam work Nooru Simhasanangal by Jaya Mohan. Um, I know, again, I want to tell you one thing, that I'm going very basic. I know that, but these are basic things that you have to understand. Okay, so marginal position is not only about the feeling of marginalization in in a person to person level. It's also about the historical context to which you belong. And for India, unfortunately, we have this strong historical background of caste, and it's a peculiar thing regarding India. The next one, which we have to talk and talk and talk about, is race, the racial marginalization. And I was talking about histories too. We have this work by Beatrice Culton, In Search of April Rain Tree. That's the name of the novel. And there we have an indigenous character, Cheryl Raintree, who is studying in a mainstream school in Canada. Okay, this is a Canadian Aboriginal work by Beatrice Culton, In Search of April Raintree, where Cheryl stands up, and it's very important. She belongs to this Métis culture, where you have this hybrid culture of the indigenous population and the colonizers. So not only the indigenous people were marginalized, even the Métis culture, the people who belong to the Métis culture, was stereotyped in many ways, like they are drunkards, they are rapists, they are sex workers, they are not good for any, I mean, they're not good for the country. They need to be taken care of. They need to be punished. So she belongs to, Cheryl Raintree belongs to this particular culture, and she stands up in a white classroom. People, I mean, the students who are white and the teachers who are white, and the syllabus which was white in all sense. She stands up when the history teacher teaches about the Canadian history, and she talks about the colonizers, the way they emancipated the Canadian culture. And to stand up is a very important political, act. She stands up and she says, I don't think that this is the Canadian culture that we are talking about. It's not a complete history. I want to ask you, where are us? Where is our history? Where is the indigenous history? That's my question. So that is why I told you that history is very important when we talk about marginalization, and that was a very important question. Regarding race, and I find that it's a very strong voice, and as literature students, I think we must, if you have not read it, please do read April Raintree. And we have see, when we start thinking about marginalization, it becomes an important task for us to look into a text. Well, see, being a literature student, the most important thing is to analyze texts. Okay, to be aware of what the text wants to tell you, and to see what the text has deliberately avoided telling you. Okay, so that is how we have, and it is in this context I want to talk about the misrepresentation of certain characters, and that is what I told you about stereotyping. We have a very grotesque and a very prejudiced view about the differently abled people. So it is from this context that now we have disability studies, which is a very prominent school of studies in this umbrella term called the studies of marginalization. And it has to be addressed, because we always have at least this, this feeling of sympathy towards people who are differently abled, and we do not expect them from them that they could be abled in any sense. Okay, and the way that even you might see in popular culture and even in literature, people who are wise, VICE, people who are villainous in nature, they are attributed, many a times they are attributed with some kind of physical disability, and that is a kind of stereotyping. Now, another very important uh, aspect when we talk about marginalization is where we always ask about what solution to it. Whenever we talk about a problem, we also want a solution to it. But what did marginalization studies actually do was that it started to reinterpret history. Like, from where did all this start? I told you it started from history, it started from religion, and history is something that is always written by the people who were in power. Okay, the people who had money, who had this agency. And it is here where you have this very important tool where the marginalized section of the community was uh, represented, and that is retelling of myths and reinterpretation of histories. In literature, let me take a very basic example. I hope that most of us would have read Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre. When you have Edward Rochester, and he had a first wife, Bertha Mason, who was basically a Caribbean woman. And because of somewhere a loud character, she was named a mad woman, and she was locked up in the attic of that huge mansion. Okay, the Gothic mansion. So you have this character, Bertha Mason, and it's a very minor character. Okay, Bertha Mason is a very minor character in Jane Eyre, but as a part of a retelling or as a part of drawing a female or a female historiography, authors like Sandra Gilbert and Susan Gubar, they've written a work, The Mad Woman in the Attic. Okay, so it's about the title itself is drawn from the character of Bertha Mason, where you can hear the howl of a mad woman. So this work, The Mad Woman in the Attic, is a representation of female expression where you do not find very assertive voices in the literature, and these characters are collected, or these characters are compiled, or they are made the heroines of new narratives. Okay, where they have a voice, they assert their voice, they express. And one way the history was not being written is that they were not allowed to written. We can take the example of Emily Dickinson, the famous American poet that in whom we celebrate like anything these days. Emily Dickinson, in those times in America, women were not even allowed to write. So she used to write in bits of paper and used to hide under rugs and a bed. So all her collections were published posthumously by her friends. So women were not expected to write. Women were not expected to express. And maybe, without expressing herself, without expressing their thoughts, she would have gone mad. And that to madness itself is a construction of patriarchy. We again that needs another session to explain how madness itself is a construction of patriarchy in many senses. And we have a work by Volga, a Telugu writer. She has written a novel called Liberation of Sita. Actually, it was called Vimukta. It has been translated to English, titled The Liberation of Sita, where you see that she is deconstructing the Ramayana itself, the character of Sita in Ramayana itself. Because Sita, what do you say? What do you think about Sita? Sita is the perfect wife that any man could have. That is see, this is what I'm talking about, the stereotyping. And the Liberation of Sita speaks about the minor characters made prominent, like Ahalya, Shurpanaka, Renuka, and all. And through these women who have been subject to the upper caste, Brahminical, Kshatriya patriarchy, they um, they reach at they come at a situation in their life where they start to understand themselves. It's a very internal contemplation, a very internal journey that they go towards self realization, and it is through these minor characters that Sita comes to understand what she is. And this is how Ramayana, we have multiple narrations of Ramayanas and Mahabharatas from the viewpoint of uh, woman, from the viewpoint of alternative sexualities, caste, class, and all. And we have very prominent historians also who have been deconstructing these histories, where they started to represent the underprivileged, the marginalized communities in India, and the forces which worked upon it. And that is, of course, which I told you, the power. And the power is where you have the power to rule, the economic power, the cultural power, the religious power. And when we talk about community, it's a very important uh, point of thought, where you have to, connect community, connect culture, connect social, situations and political situation. Understood. For a period of time, you might see that a community was very powerful, and after a point of time, it was completely wiped away from the enslaving, or maybe another overpowering community which came into being. We have Dravidian studies where we all talk about the Aryan culture or the Brahminical culture, relegating the Dravidian culture, at least the South Indian part of, the South Indian culture, Dravidian culture, calling them Rakshasas and Raktasis. That is another way of marginalization. You can brand people and marginalize them. Understood. Call them uncivilized, call them, what do you say, man eaters. You can name them in any way, and you can just portray that particular community that you are marginalizing as a very grotesque group of people, and that we have come as maybe as an Aryan Raja like Rama, that I have come and I am here to propagate not only the Aryan civilization, but also to civilize the people of that particular community. And when we say that, we also have post-colonial studies, which is, I would say, the maybe the pioneers of marginalization studies, and you have literatures where you talk about certain occupations. We have this, uh, maybe more than in English literature, we find these nuances of representation of marginalization in regional literatures. And it's very important as literature students that we read regional literatures, and at least what we say, the translations of regional literatures. And if possible, we should take up the responsibility of translating these works, because things need to be represented, and representation is one thing that is very important when we talk about marginalization, because representation is which has been denied to a larger section of the society of communities in the world. You have Australian Aboriginal studies, we have African studies, we have Chicana studies, we have Canadian studies, Aboriginal studies, we have studies, caste studies. I'm telling you all this just to understand that there are contexts of marginalization which you can connect to literature. And we have Google with us. You can search if you need any works to, you know, upon which you could make analysis. We have, yes, I wanted to talk about one compilation. It's the name of it. The editor work is "Facing the Mirror" by Ashwini Suptankar. This particular work is a compilation of lesbian narratives. Okay, it's a very interesting collection, because it's not only about stories and poetry written on the lesbian theme. It is also about, lesbian women talking to themselves, songs, journal entries, and we have even one of the narrative that you find in Facing Mirror is about uh, a woman, a lesbian woman. She makes a particular food. Okay, she combines certain ingredients which could elevate your sexual power as a lesbian woman. So you have all kinds of narratives, and the importance of the narratives of I would like to like I'm concluding in a way I'm trying to conclude just by saying that you cannot expect the voices of marginalized being heard even in the form of the mainstream literary genres like fiction, like poetry, like autobiography. It's not a mandatory process. Because most of the marginalized history is in the form of orature. It is passed down through generations, and most of them were not written down. So it's very important to document these. These histories, these voices. So it does not mean that necessarily it would be in fiction form or it would have a form in itself. Okay, it could be formless. So maybe it would be in visual performances. So it the importance of reinventing the voices of marginalization is to document it as far as possible. And this is one project that as literature students we all can uh, attempt. So I would like to just have a, I don't know, this is a vague conclusion, I know that, but it's all about representation. And we have this huge debate upon the caste representation in your job, the reservation system of caste. And there is this never ending uh, debates on reservation system. But it's all about if we really know what marginalization means in a social context, and if we really understand what representation means, the debates would end. So I hope as literature students we take up this journey to read literature between lines and to understand the misrepresentations or even elisions. Okay, you can always think about why this particular community was not at all represented in a text. And that is that point of realization when you start to think about marginalization. And that is what I know that this is a very brief. I don't know what it was like. It's a very brief chain of thoughts that I tried to give it to you, and it's not. It was not. I didn't mean to. Instill ideas into your mind. I didn't attempt at it. My idea was to instill you in a process of thinking where you can arrive at ideas. And if you are seriously into literature, and if you're really seriously into the studies in literature, this is what you have to understand, that ideas are open, and it's a journey towards these ideas that takes us further into this thing called analysis. And marginalization is always, the studies of marginalization is always about that, because you never know which community is marginalized, and you never know, because if you never know, it is because you are privileged. Okay, so let me have discussions and let me have comments, questions, anything. Welcome.
Yes, 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 yes. Thank you, thank you, thank you, Ricky. So the feedback link is posted in the comment box, and really thankful to the session on the
Shivashankar
representation
sir,
of.
you are not audible. I can't hear you.
Hello, hello.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. No, I was just thanking you for the session, and I think what the students of literature, should do, as you said, a student of literature should try to historicize. And I think that is what our students are trying to do. Our students are told to do, because we have an English and history development department here, and I think this issue will uh, give them a new direction to understand literature. So the discussion is open. I think the number of participants is nearly 90 or something. So if you have a particular question, you can switch on your audio and you can ask. You don't need to comment it. If you are willing, you can speak and hello? Hello? Hello, hello? Am I audible to you?
The voice is breaking, actually.
Okay. Hello? If you have any questions, you can ask. That's what I'm trying to say. If you have, if participants, if you have any questions, you can ask. You don't have to comment in the chat box. You can ask. Thank you. The stage is open now.
I have a question to ma'am.
Yeah, please.
I'm working on my research area is Dalit women autobiographies. So, where I have noticed that whenever I'm working, I'm publishing any paper or I'm sharing any link on that, so people asking like, "Are you a Dalit?" So my question is it necessary that I should be a Dalit so that I can do this kind of research? Because I am doing this out of my interest, and when this comprehensive Viva will be there, so definitely this kind of questions are there. Even my friend is working on tribal literature, so same question is coming for her also, that are you a tribe? So how could you feel that what exactly is going on there? So how to face such kind of questions?
Anintita, isn't it?
Yeah, ma'am.
Yes.
So that's again one of the tricky parts when we attempt at studying literature, isn't it? That it's about authenticity. The question is authenticity. It's not it's a question that should be addressed in a way to say that it's very important to have perspectives, and to have perspective, it's not mandatory that you should belong to that particular community. Okay.
Yes.
So you could answer it saying this, like it's a perspective that anyone can draw. Literature is not that, it's not a very closed compartment, it's not a watertight compartment. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not mandatory that you should belong to that particular community to study about that community. But for a person who belongs to that community, would be able to pose or would be able to interfere in those questions in a better manner. That is for sure. Okay, but for us to study a marginalized community is not a sin, or it's not a prohibited thing as far as literature is concerned. So to develop perspective, it is very important, and this question, if posed by the person who belongs to that community, would be because of this fear of being misrepresented. Either you would that person would have this fear that you would misrepresent that person, or it might come from the the historical understanding and the consciousness that they have been misrepresented and mistreated. Okay, so that comes from a point of view of that long journey of the marginalized life that that particular person has lived. Otherwise, as literature student, any vista of literature is open to us, and that does not mean that you shouldn't be studying it. At it doesn't question the authenticity of your work, as far as it does not malignate the community which you are going to study. Because as far as we have seen these in these years, in the even in the past, what we have seen is that people go there, make they give them an objective or a position of object, being an object, study that community and give a very misrepresented or a very prejudiced view of what that particular community means. Okay, and Dalit woman autobiography, I just missed out on that point, that it's not about a single operation. We have multiple operations, and I thought, I mean, it would be a very long narrative if we start talking about multiple operation. But just understand that it's not connected. It's not only about having an identity of a single marginalized position. We have multiple marginalized positions.
Yes.
Okay. Yes. And I have a question here. After Sheetal Shivdas, after hearing all your thoughts, I felt that equality is an ideal thought. What do you think about that thought, ma'am? Actually, to have an ideal thought is not a problem. It's a very good thing to have an ideal thought. So, equality is an, I would say we have moved from equality to equity. Okay. Equality doesn't guarantee you that. For example, equality is if I need 40 rupees and my friend needs 60 rupees, and what we have is 100 rupees. And if we go by the equality theory, I'll have 50 and my friend would have 50. But equity is where the person who needs 60 gets 60 and 40 gets 40. Okay, that is what you mean by equity. And to and it's a very needed position, and you could reach that equality or maybe this equity, the position of equity, only when we start to represent the marginalized section of the society, and when we start asserting our voice. Asserting is very important, and asserting does not mean yes, it also means no. Okay, so if you are being misrepresented, you should say no, that no, that it's not the way that we should be represented. So having an assertive voice is also important, and that's a very very good position, isn't it? It's a very that ideal thought is ideal thought should be converted to ideal situation. To the term marginalization, Savitri ma'am, do the term marginalization explore beyond the varieties of humankind? Of course, we have animal studies. We're talking about human beings. We have animal studies, we have animal rights narratives, and your question is also a very interesting question, because if we talk about humankind, we must think what is the definition of humankind is in the first place. Okay, who all are included in this term humankind? So what is what is what does it mean to be a part of humankind? And if this definition of humankind is parallel to or is synonymical to the question of power, the center, the power center, doesn't make any sense, because it is never going to address any kind of marginal position. But if humankind, you look it in a holistic manner, or if you again see the nuances of marginalizations, you might be able to go beyond what the varieties of humankind. And we have, seriously, we have animal studies. It's a very emerging school of studies. Marginalized are existentialist. What's your take up on this comment? Um, Existentialism, somewhere I have a CJ teacher. Isn't it? Yeah. My take on existentialism is also, it's a very, I don't have a very concrete sense of uh, definition of existentialism. Somewhere existentialism, you know, it encourages the inabilities in a human being, or to be very passive about the inabilities of human beings. So marginalization as an existential position was a process at the very beginning of studies of marginalization. I would say it has become a lot more active and lot more assertive these days. So it is just not being it's just not existential question. The studies of marginalization, or the feeling, or the addressing the addressing the question of marginalization has become a very active political uh, activity, a task. And in literature, uh, yeah, in literature we have this animal studies, narratives from the perspective of we have anthropocentric studies, where we also think from the perspective of the animals, the characters of animals, uh, which are depicted in a narrative. Okay. um, I'll just come to the example. I just missed out the name of that work. I'll come back to it, Savitri. Now, sir, can I know, are you asking to stay to
No, no,
every
that
student? No,
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 that's
that
not
was a
my
question
question.
to
That's not my question. Yeah.
Abhirami's question.
Abhirami,
Exactly,
Abhirami.
Abhirami's question. Yes.
Even though there are literary texts like Second Sex by Simone de Beauvoir and writers like Chinua Achebe and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie come out as a protest to the marginalization through their books, are these works influencing the society? What is your opinion? That is what I told you. Okay, to address these questions intellectually, it's a very safe position, isn't it? To debate. Like, see, I'm sitting here in a comfortable room talking about marginalization. It's a very comfortable position, and to take the forefront and talk about marginalization is a very difficult task, because you would have to, whenever we have to address marginalization, you need to raise your voice, and to raise your voice is about questioning the power, and to question the power is not very easy. Okay. um, I shall take a very simple example, a very working example. You, at your home, you go and tell that I want to walk in the night. As a woman, I want to walk in the night. They won't allow you because you're questioning the authority, questioning a lot of patriarchal notions, not only your parents, a lot, or your husband, or your partner, or your siblings, or whoever relatives. It's not only about, it's also about questioning the authority, a patriarchal authority. So to question authority is not an easy task. So in practical life, it's very difficult, and it's a very popular, thing that we say that we people, who are very forward thinking, who talk lot of political, very politically correct, in a very who hold a very political correct position in the society. They take out their footwear or chappal of modernity outside their home and enter their houses, because this practicality of questioning the authority is very difficult when you take it to your uh, places where there are centers of power, like family, like institutions and all. Yes. How to overcome such inequalities in the society? The first thing, as Ambedkar would say, is education. And education does not necessarily mean that it should be, degrees, the certificates that you get. Education is something, it's not learning. It's not learning data. It's also about learning things in your life. Education is something which gives you alternative realities in front of you. You start to realize that what you have been seeing, what you have been hearing is not the only realities of life. And education is a very important tool for that. Um, yes, ma'am, Akshara. It's Akshara. Yes, Thomas Dixon, sir, you can ask a question. Why not? But before that, let me address Akshara. Okay. Ma'am, in God of Small Things, Ammu is considered as somewhat bold. But if we swipe up the position of Ammu and Valita, is there any chance of acceptance to Ammu? Yeah, that's a very important question that I've been raising. Like, if Ammu belonged to that Dalit caste, was it an intentional take from Arundhati Roy? What if the position was swiped? What if the position was swiped? We have uh, it's a very old movie in 1970s. We have it's a Malayalam movie. The name of the movie is Collector Maladi. Okay, where a Dalit woman, portrayed by Sheila, she becomes a collector. Okay. Um, and yeah, whatever I talk now, you can just analyze and just try to incorporate it through the characters. And I don't think maybe Arundhati Roy at that point of time. This is another reading which is possible. Like Arundhati Roy, who belonged to a Syrian Christian family, who was like, a very privileged position in that sense. I'm not talking about as a woman, but maybe that was her, uh, position. What we have been seeing about the Dalit women in our popular culture or literature is that she is just an object of work. by the upper caste people. Like she had to physically labor, put her labor into the works or the properties that the upper caste people owned, and even the sexual objects. So if Ammu's role is swiped with Veluta's position, caste position, I don't think the same treatment would have been there. And anyway, as Jay Mohan in Nuru Simhasanam says that if there is even if a Dalit commits a crime, I would just stand by the Dalit person, because by default, he is the person who has been marginalized throughout his life, throughout the history. Okay.
Jackie, please
The,
address Thomas Dixon's question.
yeah.
I
Thomas
think he wants
Dixon,
to
sir,
ask
I think
something.
he
Good
wants to ask. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Ms. Raki.
Hi, hello.
Myself Dixon here. I'm speaking from Trichur.
Okay.
I am a retired person. I have been, for the last 30 years, I have been teaching. I happened to my Dr. Chaco Jose of Sacred Heart College, Chalakudi, referred me to this program. So my question is coming to the point. So we were talking about the reading the marginalized in literature. As well as my point of view is concerned, the plight of the marginalized people come to limelight only through the works of the well-known writers, actually. For example, Toti Idamagan in Tagari. Tagari is Toti Idamagan. And later on, Gasak, to a certain extent, O.V. Vijayan's Gasak and Itigasam. And if you say later and recently, Manishan Amugam, National Kendra Sahitya Academy, and B, and for his gentleman's name, young man, Madhrubhumi. And pardon?
Subhash Chandra.
Subhash Chandra. I said, beautifully he has narrated all. So why the plight of the marginalized people in the subjects, but I understand is reading the reading the marginalized in literature. Are you pointing towards the life, the plight of the marginalized depicted in literature, or the works written by works of the marginalized? That is, I was a little bit confused from the beginning itself. So we were talking about all the writings regarding the life of the marginalized people in society. In that case, our state, I would say, it is it is in the forefront compared to any other state, because since I have been through the length and breadth of the country, I was in the Ministry of Home Affairs for 21 years. And I had been to length and breadth everywhere, especially Bihar, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Uttar Pradesh, or anywhere you go. The marginalized people, they are in the, it's so marginalized, they don't come even in the margin. They are not at all in the limelight. So this depiction of the people, depiction of the marginalized people, compared to any other literature in India, that is, Malayalam, it is depicted beautifully. Of course, as somebody pointed out, God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. And certain extent, I would say, if you come to the City of Joy by Dominic Lapre, regarding the life of the rickshaw pullers in Kolkata, you can imagine how he has narrated all those things, the do's and don'ts, and the Lakshmana Rekha all around them, all those things. So why it is, my simple question is, why the life of the marginalized people is depicted only through the works of the already well-known writers in the in the spectrum of literature, not by the literature. So I happened to listen in Kerala Sahitya Academy just before lockdown. Sunny M. Kapikad, you may have heard about him. Right? So he was arguing for that, why the works of the marginalized people, written by marginalized people, is not coming to the limelight. Can you put some light upon that one, Ms. Raki?
Yeah.
So I will add
Yes.
something.
Yes.
Ma'am, many are there. Many, to some extent, this is true now, and to some extent, this is not true now, because many women have already published their. They started writing. It was only that they don't have the access of English language. That is why they were not coming to the picture. They started writing in their own regional languages, and now it is getting translated. Just for take example. That is the Wave of My Life. You take example of The Prison We Broke. All they
Yes.
are the writers. They're women writers, and they are marginalized people, and they are writing. It's not like they are not. Now they are coming in the picture. So it is
Yes. Yes.
true. It is not true also.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes,
I think
I
we
was
should let
going to
Ragi
connect.
answer so that
Yeah,
yes.
I was thinking about Miss Anantita's concern when Thomas sir was talking about this
Yes.
particular
Exactly.
question. Yes,
Exactly.
yeah, it's like first thing we have to understand that we have come a long way, forward from the writings of, as you said, O.V. Vijayan, be it O.V. Vijayan, Tagari, or whoever it is, because we have multitude works coming up and in different forms, in different genres about, if it is about subjective experiences, we have autobiography, we have ethnographic studies. It's very important, autoethnographic narratives, where they themselves, the community themselves, the people from those community themselves, have started representing their works. And Sanniyam Kabikada is a very prominent voice in Kerala, and that question is very prominent because it's not only about the English education or the writing in English, because it has, of course, we cannot deny that it has got a global perspective if you write in English. But it's very important to, as far as marginalized community is concerned, the language of those communities is very important, and it's not about the translatability. And when I was attending a seminar on some similar subjects, it's like it's a very post-colonial thought that. And we all know that, I just want to touch upon it, that if you we are not aware of the English culture, but we uh, learn it through footnotes and other references. So to understand the marginalized community, the reverse process could be possible. Okay, you can search for the footnote, or you could search for that. You can take the same labor to understand. So Sanyam Kabikat's concern is also about the publication of these works, and it is also about, I told you that I never told that the caste system and the hierarchy has diminished in our society. It has never done that. And but at the same time, we can see that many independent publishers are coming up who have started publishing works from the marginalized communities. Even we have Kali for Women in India, which published feminist works. Okay, including Sharmila Rege and all. And we have publications like, um I happen to forget these names. We have this Dalit publication. Just slipped my mind. And we are coming up with independent publications of these works. So it's not that those representations are confined to these privileged writers or already established writers. We have scores of writers coming up, and especially the one point that you have said is almost agreeable, that South India in general, they have got a voluminous, collection of the underprivileged narratives. But it's coming, it's like I told you, it's a very maybe it has taken just one or two decades that these works have started getting published. Okay, so we can wait, I would say. Like, it's not about the privileged person's publication or writings on underprivileged. The underprivileged have started coming out, and we have this writings on, I mean, we have upcoming writings, like, I happened to read a work. One second, please give me a second.
Sure. Um,
I had just I mean, like, I have a problem with names, we have this yes, writer from Odisha, who is a Sambalpuri poet, Haldar Nag. Okay, he was conferred with Padma Shri or Padma Bhushan, I'm not very sure, but he was awarded doctorate by the Sambalpur University. So we have poets and writers from the other parts of not only South India. We have this, again, that is a very privileged. We have this. kind of air that as South Indians or even as Keralites we stand a notch higher than the other part of India. So we have that kind of thought also. But we have poets like I mean, Haldar Nag's poetry is really worth looking into because it's very poignant about the marginalized community and about the invisible community. I wanted to talk about, I just missed. Thanks to Thomas Dixon, he raised this question. We have fourth world literature. Okay, and it is completely an offshoot of marginalization studies where fourth world, we have first world, second world, third world, and fourth world is a world where is the world of those people who do not have a geography of their own. Okay, who have been completely pushed away from the mainstream atlas or mainstream mapping. So we have a fourth world literature where all these indigenous studies and aboriginal studies come up, even our Dalit literature. So literature students who are interested can also look into Dalit literature, I mean fourth world literature. I have a question from Anjana Elza Abraham. In connection with Dalit literature in Kerala, C. Ayyappan's works using the narrative forms of spectral autobiographical speech to represent the Dalit consciousness. How are these works bringing the margins of Dalitness in Kerala to the mainstream? Could you please suggest a few works of Dalit literature in Kerala? I would like to tell you, Anjana, that I was talking about this work, Oxford compilation of Dalit literature from Kerala. It's a translated, it's an English translation of Dalit writings in Kerala, which is edited by Professor V. Dasan and Professor Pratibha V. You can look into that. You have this whole lot of collection of even you have poetry, you have stories, you have parts of fiction, you have interviews, you have speech. Even Ayyappan's story Madness is featured in that particular book. Okay. I think Farshana has a question to ask, but I didn't see the question in the comment box.
Farshana, hello?
Good afternoon,
Farshana?
everyone. Yes,
Yeah,
sir.
good
Farshana,
afternoon.
you can ask.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, ma'am.
Yeah, hello,
I'm
hello.
Farshana. I'm a third sem student from
Okay.
Tirthala Government School.
Okay. PG third
Tirthala
sem.
Government College. No.
Which college?
Tirthala Government College.
Tirthala Government College, Palakkad. Okay.
UG student. That's it.
Okay.
Now, I wish to know more about self-marginalization and
Okay.
also how can we relate marginalization and psychology?
Marginalization and psychology is a huge subject, even part of my research, PhD research. Self-marginalization, you can't tell that it's a very subjective activity. Okay. If you start that you start feeling that you're being marginalized, it is also about the social conditions that surround you. Okay, which make you feel like that. Self marginalization also is a very subjective position. As I told you, it's a very contextual position where your marginalized identity won't be considered marginal as a marginalized position by the outer world. And that is where the inner conflict, the inner self comes into being. And that is why I also um, took the example of Bertha Mason, where it's connected to madness. A woman being mad. How did she become mad? Okay, how can we term a person mad? To understand that, Farshana, I would like to recommend you. I would like to recommend a particular text by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. It's a 18th century. American short story which is available online. Okay, The Yellow Wallpaper. Okay, so if you read The Yellow Wallpaper, you can understand that the discourse of how the discourse of madness itself is a construction of patriarchy, and how even the treatment of madness was also patriarchal. Okay, I can do one thing. I can just type my email ID here so that if you have any query or if you have any discussion, you can easily contact me through the mail, because without reading that particular story, it's not possible for us to discuss it, Parshana. If you come reading that Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, to brief it, it's like a woman is a recent mother. Okay, she is told that she's mad, and that is particularly we know now it's postpartum depression. Okay, so the cure, the treatment that the doctors advocated was rest cure. Rest cure means you go in, you're put inside a room and you rest. You are forcefully asked to rest. Okay, you're not allowed to talk to people, you're not allowed to write, you're not allowed to read, you not do, you have to rest, that's it. And that makes her more insane. Okay, so the this inner world, and the marginality is a very again very nuanced thing. That what is insanity, that definition itself, the discussion around the definition of insanity itself is it's very subjective in a sense. And if you
Okay.
want, you can. I just came across the stories of Yama, Malayali writer Yama. You could read that also.
Yes, yes,
Yes.
yes. So let us wind up. We have to close the session at
Yeah.
3:35 or something, because after that
Yes.
another teacher is waiting to take a
Yeah. Yeah. So
Google
please
session.
ask. I mean, you can just mail me, anyone. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
So Ragi's email ID is provided here. If you have any doubts or comments, you can send her through email. And we are really thankful to Ragi's presentation. And more than that, I would like to thank Mr. Thomas Dixon and Anindita and all other people, Farshana,
Yes.
for asking these questions, because this is how you make such an effort fruitful. And we are also delighted. And when it comes to Thomas Dixon's question, I think Ragi was, in her title, she was also trying to rethink or historicize the very process of reading, because reading in literature, and that's a question usually asked by students. Should we be a marginalized to study marginality, or should we really be post-colonial to study post-coloniality? So such questions are there, and we are really thankful to the questions asked, and also to the sudden reply by Madam, and also to the questions, question raised by Anjana regarding C.I. Appen's short stories and the spectral narratives there. I think the book was edited by Professor M. Dasan. You said some.
Yeah. I just it's not
Yes,
visa.
M.
Yeah,
Dasan.
that's it. Yes.
It is M. Dasan. And if you're a Malayali, Anjana, if you're a Malayali, there is a Malayalam Manorama has published a collection of C.I. Appen's works. And there is an interesting interview. An interview is there of C.I. Appen's interview is provided there, and there you will get a different take on the concept of marginality in a different way. So thank you for the comments. Thank you for the presentation. We'll go for we'll wind up the session, and I request Nitya from our fifth semester to deliver the vote of thanks. Nitya, are
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Good evening, all. Respected teachers, dear friends, and everyone else joined in this webinar. It is my privilege to have been asked to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. I, on behalf of the entire English department and my own behalf, extend a very hearty vote of thanks to each one gathered here today. A big thank you to Srimati K.R. Ragi, Assistant Professor in the Department of English, Government Arts and Science College, Kozhikode, for her efforts towards a talk on reading the marginalized in literature and giving us an in-depth lecture about each and every corner of social and cultural marginalization. Thank you, ma'am, for reminding us about each forms of it. I once again thank you all for being with us in this evening and resolutely joining in this webinar. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
So
you
with
so
that,
much.
we'll come to the end of the
Yeah.
session. You can leave, and I request third semester and fifth semester students of our department to stay here. Others can leave. Thank you.
Sir, regarding recording.
Yes. Switch it off. Teacher, turn it off. Stop.
stop recording.